My name is Mackenzie Warner, and I was 28 years old when my family decided I was no longer worthy of being a Warner. Born into wealth and privilege, I never imagined my wedding day would end with betrayal. Finding those vacation photos with the caption, "The family is finally whole," broke something inside me. What they never understood was that I inherited more than just the Warner name. I inherited their ruthlessness too. Before I tell you how I dismantled a family empire, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. The Warner name meant something in Boston. My father, Richard Warner, had built Warner Development into one of the largest real estate firms on the East Coast. Our family home was a sprawling colonial mansion in Beacon Hill, where appearances mattered more than emotions. As the youngest child, after my brother James, 33, and sister Rebecca, 31, I grew up watching my father groom James to take over the company someday, despite his obvious lack of business acumen or work ethic. James is the Warner heir, my father would say at dinner parties, while I sat quietly with perfect posture as my mother Elaine had taught me. My mother was the quintessential corporate wife, beautiful, poised, and completely devoted to maintaining our family's social standing. She never contradicted my father, not even when he overlooked my accomplishments in favor of James's mediocrity. From an early age, I showed an aptitude for numbers and strategy that James lacked. While he partied through college, I graduated with dual degrees in finance and business administration. When that wasn't enough to impress my father, I completed my MBA at Harvard, graduating at the top of my class. "Very nice, Mackenzie," was all my father said at my graduation, before turning to discuss a property deal with James. Despite the constant dismissal, I was determined to prove myself worthy of the Warner legacy. When I turned 24, I finally secured a position at Warner Development, not because my father offered it, but because the board of directors had specifically requested my involvement after seeing my thesis on urban development trends. My office was half the size of James's, but I didn't complain. Instead, I worked twice as hard. Within a year, projects under my supervision showed a 22% increase in profitability, while James's ventures consistently underperformed. The numbers spoke for themselves, but my father had selective hearing. Rebecca, my sister, had no interest in the family business. She had married Bradley Thompson, heir to a banking fortune, and dedicated her life to climbing Boston's social ladder. She viewed my ambition with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Don't you want to find a nice man and settle down, Mackenzie?" she would ask during our monthly sister lunches that felt more like interrogations. All this business talk is so unbecoming. The family dynamics grew more strained when I met Tyler Hayes at a charity fundraiser. Tyler wasn't from money. He was a structural engineer who had worked his way through state college. He was brilliant, kind, and completely unimpressed by the Warner name, which was exactly what attracted me to him. "He drives a Honda," my mother whispered in horror when I first brought him home for dinner. My father barely engaged with him, asking only cursory questions before retreating to his study with James to discuss business matters that apparently didn't concern me. After Tyler left, my father called me into his study. "He seems nice enough, Mackenzie, but you need to be realistic about your position. The Warner name comes with certain expectations." I felt my face flush with anger. "Tyler is brilliant and hardworking. Aren't those Warner values?" My father smiled thinly. "Of course they are. But there are other considerations for someone in your position." Those other considerations became increasingly clear as my relationship with Tyler progressed. Invitations to family events would arrive late or with impossible conditions. When business associates asked about my personal life, my parents would change the subject. At company functions, Tyler was seated far from the family table. Still, I persisted in both my career and my relationship. I secured 3 major development deals that boosted company profits significantly. Tyler proposed on our 2-year anniversary, with a modest but beautiful ring that meant more to me than any of the ostentatious jewelry my mother favored. When I showed my family the engagement ring, my mother frowned. "It's quaint." Rebecca actually laughed. James made a joke about cubic zirconia that made Tyler's jaw tighten beside me. "We're very happy for you," my father said in a tone that suggested anything but happiness. Later that night, I noticed I had been excluded from a family group chat titled Warner Central. When confronted, Rebecca claimed it was just for planning my father's surprise birthday party. It was the first of many lies that would eventually unravel the foundation of what I thought was my family. Tyler's proposal was everything I had dreamed of: intimate, thoughtful, and genuine. He had arranged a private dinner on the rooftop of the building where we first met, with the Boston skyline glittering around us. When he dropped to one knee, his hands slightly trembling as he presented the ring, I knew with absolute certainty that this was the man I wanted to build a life with. "You're the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever known," he said. "I want to stand beside you for the rest of our lives." The warmth of that moment quickly cooled when I called my parents. My mother's first question was whether we had discussed a prenuptial agreement. My father asked to speak with Tyler directly about his intentions. By the time I hung up, my euphoria had been replaced by a familiar disappointment. When I announced our engagement at the next family dinner, there was a perfunctory round of congratulations. My mother immediately took control of the conversation. "We'll need to book the Fairmont immediately," she declared. "June is the only acceptable month for a Warner wedding. I'll call the Crawfords, the Bishops, and the Flemings tomorrow." "Actually," I interjected, "Tyler and I were thinking of an October wedding. Something smaller, maybe at the Botanical Gardens." The silence that followed was deafening. "Don't be ridiculous, Mackenzie," Rebecca said with a laugh. "Warners don't get married in public parks." The wedding planning quickly became a battleground. Every decision, from the venue to the flowers to the guest list, turned into a power struggle. My mother insisted on inviting over 300 people, most of whom were business associates I barely knew. She dismissed the venue I loved as common and the dress I had chosen as inappropriate for someone of your standing. Behind the scenes, family dynamics were shifting in even more concerning ways. I noticed that James was being included in high-level meetings that I, despite my position and performance, was not invited to. When I questioned my father, he brushed it off as James is taking on more responsibility now that he's matured. Matured was an interesting choice of words for a man who had recently crashed his third luxury car while intoxicated. Yet when I reviewed the company financials, I discovered that my father had approved a substantial executive bonus for James, while my proposals for staff raises had been deemed fiscally irresponsible. Tyler noticed my growing distress. "You don't have to prove anything to them, Mackenzie," he said one night as I pored over project proposals. "You're exceptional, with or without their approval." His support was unwavering, but the situation at Warner Development continued to deteriorate. I discovered that Rebecca's husband had been appointed to the board of directors, a fact I learned not through official channels, but by accidentally seeing his name on a meeting agenda left in the conference room. 2 months before our wedding, I discovered something even more disturbing. While reviewing quarterly projections, I noticed financial inconsistencies in several of our larger projects. Substantial sums were being diverted to shell companies I didn't recognize. When I brought this to our CFO's attention, he became evasive and said he would discuss it with your father. The next day, my access to certain financial systems was restricted due to system updates. When I confronted my father, he seemed genuinely angry for the first time. "You need to focus on your wedding, Mackenzie," he said sharply. "The company's finances are not your concern right now." But they were my concern. As a director of the company, I had legal responsibilities. When I tried to discuss this with James, he smirked. "Maybe you should reconsider your priorities, little sister. Family loyalty matters more than playing corporate watchdog." The message was clear: stay in line or face consequences. Meanwhile, wedding preparations continued. My mother had overridden most of my preferences, transforming my vision of an intimate autumn celebration into an extravagant June society event. The guest list was dominated by people important to Warner Development rather than to Tyler and me. One evening, scrolling through my phone, I realized I hadn't seen updates from the family group chat in days. When I checked, I discovered I had been removed. When I mentioned this to Rebecca, she shrugged it off. It was getting too busy with wedding talk. We created a new one to give you space. But at Sunday dinner, I overheard James mentioning something about Hawaii plans to my father, who quickly changed the subject when he noticed me listening. Later, I found a travel brochure for a luxury resort in Maui in my mother's purse when she asked me to retrieve her phone. A week before the wedding, my office was relocated to a smaller space on a lower floor to accommodate organizational changes. My assistant was reassigned. Projects I had developed were suddenly under James's supervision. The message couldn't have been clearer if they had written it on the wall. I was being systematically pushed out. But I still hoped that my wedding day would bring reconciliation. That somehow, witnessing my happiness with Tyler would remind my family of what truly mattered. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of my wedding dawned with perfect June weather, clear blue skies, and just enough breeze to rustle the cherry blossoms outside the hotel suite where I was getting ready. Despite everything, I felt a surge of hope. Surely today, seeing me walk down the aisle, my family would finally embrace Tyler and our future together. My mother arrived late to the bridal suite, already issuing directives to the wedding planner and photographers. She barely looked at my dress, the one I had chosen despite her objections, before focusing on her own appearance in the mirror. "The Aldrich family just canceled," she said casually, applying another coat of lipstick. Something about a sudden conflict. The Aldriches were major investors in Warner Development. Their absence would be noticed. The Blakemores and Suttons sent their regrets as well, she continued. Such a shame. By the time I walked down the aisle, nearly a quarter of the guests, all business associates of my father, had mysteriously canceled. My father waited until the last possible moment to take his place beside me for our walk. "You look nice," he said, his highest form of praise. Then, just before the music started, "I hope you know what you're doing, Mackenzie." I squeezed his arm perhaps a bit too tightly. "I'm marrying the man I love, Dad." "Yes," he replied, his voice cool. "And choices have consequences." As we proceeded down the aisle, I saw Tyler waiting for me, his eyes filled with love and certainty. Behind him stood his parents, modest, hard-working people who had welcomed me with genuine warmth from our first meeting. The contrast between their open affection and my family's calculated appearances had never been more stark. The ceremony itself was beautiful, a rare moment where my wishes had prevailed over my mother's. Tyler and I had written our own vows, promising to stand by each other through whatever life brought our way. Little did I know how soon those vows would be tested. At the reception, the Warner family occupied a table near the front, physically present but emotionally distant. My father gave a brief toast that focused more on the Warner legacy than on my marriage. My mother corrected the servers on proper wine service. James spent most of the evening on his phone, occasionally smirking at messages he received. As I circulated among guests, I overheard fragments of conversation from my cousin Andrew, who had always been loose-lipped after a few drinks. "Next week in Hawaii, whole family's going, amazing villa." When I approached, he abruptly changed the subject to congratulate me on the lovely ceremony. During a quiet moment between dances, I checked my phone and discovered that a new family group chat had been created, Warner Core, that once again excluded me. A notification showed several recent messages about flight arrangements and packing lists. I sought out Rebecca, finding her by the bar ordering another champagne. "Is there something going on with Hawaii?" I asked directly. She barely concealed her annoyance. "It's just a little family trip. Nothing special." A family trip right after my wedding that no one mentioned to me? Rebecca sighed dramatically. "Don't be so sensitive, Mackenzie. You'll be on your honeymoon anyway. It just worked out that way with everyone's schedules." But I could see the lie in her eyes. This was deliberate, A family vacation intentionally planned when they knew I would be unavailable. The realization settled over me like a cold shadow. The canceled guests. The constant phone checking. The whispered conversations. My family had tolerated my wedding as an obligation, but had already planned their escape, their real celebration, without me. When Tyler found me moments later, he immediately noticed my expression. "What happened?" he asked, his hand warm and steady on my back. "I think my family is going to Hawaii next week. All of them. They didn't invite us or even tell me." Tyler's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "They're lost then. We'll be in Bali, making much better memories." He was right, of course. But the hurt ran deep. This wasn't just about a vacation, it was the culmination of years of exclusion, now made publicly clear on what should have been the happiest day of my life. As we prepared to leave the reception, my father approached us with an envelope. "Your wedding gift," he said stiffly. "The deed to a condo in the Back Bay development. Consider it your starter home." I knew that property, a beautiful space, certainly, but also the smallest unit in a building Warner Development had struggled to fully lease. Even his generosity felt calculated. "Thank you," I said, accepting the envelope. "We appreciate it." As our car pulled away from the venue, I looked back to see my family already huddled together, not even watching our departure. My mother was checking her watch. "Are you okay?" Tyler asked, squeezing my hand. "I will be," I promised, leaning into his embrace. "We're going to have an amazing honeymoon, and when we get back, I think it's time for some changes." Little did I know just how significant those changes would be. Or that the final breaking point was waiting for me in a social media post that would shatter any remaining illusions about my place in the Warner family. Bali was paradise. Our private villa overlooked the Indian Ocean. Palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, and for the first few days, I managed to push thoughts of my family to the back of my mind. Tyler and I explored ancient temples, swam in crystal-clear waters, and made love as the sun set over the horizon. In those moments, wrapped in his arms, I felt a sense of belonging I had never experienced with the Warners. "You seem lighter here," Tyler observed as we shared a breakfast of tropical fruits on our villa's terrace. "Like you've left something heavy behind." "I have," I admitted. "I think I've been carrying my family's expectations for so long that I forgot what it feels like to just be myself." But old habits die hard. 5 days into our honeymoon, unable to sleep due to jet lag, I found myself scrolling through social media. That's when I saw it. A photo posted by my 16-year-old cousin Lily, who had obviously missed the family memo about digital discretion. The image showed my entire family, my parents, James, Rebecca and her husband, aunts, uncles, cousins, all smiling widely on a pristine Hawaiian beach. They were arranged around a banner that read Warner Family Reunion 2023. The caption beneath the photo read, "The family's finally whole. Best vacation ever. #Ohana Warner, #family complete." Family complete. Without me. I felt physically ill. A wave of nausea washing over me as I zoomed in on the image. They all looked so happy, so united in my absence. The date stamp showed they had flown to Hawaii the day after my wedding. This wasn't a last-minute trip. This had been planned, coordinated, and deliberately concealed. Tyler found me on the bathroom floor an hour later, still clutching my phone. Tears dried on my cheeks. "They planned it," I said, my voice hollow as I showed him the photo. "They planned a family reunion without us, right after our wedding. They're celebrating their complete family, the family without me in it." Tyler's expression darkened as he examined the photo. "I'm so sorry, Mackenzie. This is beyond cruel." "The worst part is that I'm not even surprised," I whispered. "This is just the final confirmation of what I've felt my entire life, that I'm not really one of them, not in the ways that matter." That night, as Tyler slept beside me, I found myself reviewing years of slights, dismissals, and exclusions with new clarity. This wasn't about my marriage to Tyler, not really. It was about my refusal to play by their rules, to accept James's superiority despite his incompetence, to overlook the increasingly questionable business practices that had become common at Warner Development. With the harsh light of this betrayal illuminating everything, other concerns that had been nagging at me suddenly came into focus. The financial irregularities I had noticed, the meetings I had been excluded from, the gradual limitation of my responsibilities despite my success. By morning, hurt had crystallized into something colder and more focused: determination. "I think we should cut our honeymoon short," I told Tyler over coffee. "There are things I need to address at home." Tyler studied my face for a moment before nodding. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But Mackenzie, make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Revenge won't heal what they've done." "This isn't about revenge," I said, though even I wasn't entirely convinced. "It's about protecting myself and my future. Our future." We returned to Boston 3 days later. I went straight to the office, ignoring the surprised looks from employees who clearly hadn't expected me back so soon. My office door was locked. When I finally got the facilities manager to open it, I discovered the space had been completely cleared except for a few personal items boxed up in the corner. My name had been removed from the door. "I'm sorry, Ms. Warner," the manager stammered. "I was told you were being relocated during your absence. The new office isn't ready yet." I maintained my composure as I collected my things, then went directly to my brother's expansive corner office. His assistant tried to stop me, but I pushed past her. James looked up from his desk with mild irritation rather than surprise. "You're back early. Trouble in paradise already. What's going on, James?" "My office has been cleared out, and my system access is restricted." He leaned back in his chair, a smug smile playing at his lips. "Just some organizational restructuring. Dad thought it would be best to implement while you were away. Less disruption that way." "Restructuring that involves removing me from my position without discussion?" "Not removing," he corrected, his tone condescending. "Repositioning. We felt that with your new married life. You might appreciate a role with fewer responsibilities, more flexible hours." The implication was clear. They assumed that now that I was married, I would step back professionally, become like my mother and sister, an accessory rather than a contributor. "Where is Dad?" I demanded. "Hawaii," James replied, not even attempting to hide it anymore. "Family vacation. Didn't Mom mention it?" I'm sure it just slipped her mind with all the wedding excitement. I left without another word, my mind racing. At home, I discovered that my access to company financial systems had been further restricted. I could no longer view the records that had concerned me before the wedding. That night, I made a decision. Using the credentials I still possessed, I began systematically downloading documents, project reports, financial statements, board minutes, emails, anything I could still access. Working through the night, I uncovered a pattern that confirmed my worst suspicions. Warner Development had been engaging in tax evasion for years. Projects were significantly over-reporting expenses while hiding profits in offshore accounts. Environmental compliance reports had been falsified on at least 3 major developments. And most recently, investor funds for a new commercial project had been diverted to cover James's failed side ventures. As the evidence accumulated on my laptop, I felt a strange mix of vindication and grief. The family business, the legacy my father had always placed above everything else, was rotten at its core. Tyler found me at dawn, still working, my eyes red from exhaustion. "What are you going to do?" he asked quietly, placing a cup of coffee beside me. I looked up at him, the man who had loved me for myself, not my name or my connections. "I'm going to protect myself," I said. "And then I'm going to make sure they never underestimate me again." The next morning, I called Diane Foster, an attorney I had met through professional channels who specialized in corporate whistleblower cases. Unlike the Warner family lawyers who operated as extensions of my father's will, Diane was known for her integrity and independence. "What you're describing is serious, Mackenzie," she said after I outlined what I had discovered. "Securities fraud, tax evasion, misappropriation of investor funds. These carry significant penalties. Are you absolutely certain you want to pursue this? These are your family members we're talking about." They stopped being family the moment they decided I wasn't one of them, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to protect myself legally. If I remain associated with the company knowing about these activities, I could be implicated. Diane nodded. You're right to be concerned. Your position as a director does create potential liability, but I want you to be fully aware of what you're setting in motion. This will likely destroy Warner Development as it currently exists. I thought about the company my grandfather had founded, that my father had built into an empire. I thought about the employees, good people who had no idea about the corruption at the top. I thought about the family name that had been both a blessing and a burden my entire life. I understand, I said finally, but I need to do what's right. Over the next 3 days, Tyler and I barely left our apartment. While he managed the mundane tasks of unpacking from our abbreviated honeymoon and handling thank you notes for wedding gifts, I worked with Diane to document everything methodically. We established secure communications channels and created multiple backups of all evidence. The emotional toll was immense. Each new document I reviewed, each email thread showing my family's deliberate deception, felt like another small death. There were moments when I found myself sobbing uncontrollably, grieving not just for what I was about to lose, but for what I had never really had, a family that valued me. Tyler held me through these breakdowns, never questioning my resolve or suggesting I back down. You're doing what you have to do, he assured me. This isn't your fault. They made their choices. On the 4th day, I received a text from Rebecca. Board meeting next Thursday. Dad says your attendance is optional since you're still settling in after the wedding. Optional. The final confirmation that they intended to proceed without me, making decisions that would affect my position and potentially leave me legally vulnerable for actions I hadn't approved. That evening, I saw another Hawaii photo posted by my aunt, showing my family at a luau, leis around their necks, tropical drinks in hand. They looked carefree, as if nothing was wrong. As if their company wasn't built on fraud, as if they hadn't just excluded their daughter and sister from what was clearly a significant family event. Something hardened inside me then. I picked up my phone and typed a single message to the family group chat I had been removed from, but that Diane's tech consultant had helped me access again. Enjoy it while it lasts. Then I executed the plan we had carefully constructed. First, I submitted my formal resignation from Warner Development, effective immediately, with copies sent to every board member and our corporate counsel. The letter explicitly cited my concerns about financial irregularities and my repeated attempts to address them. Next, using the emergency authorization that had never been revoked from my account, I froze the main payroll processing system, not permanently, but enough to create a 48-hour delay that would set off alarm bells throughout the company. Finally, I submitted a comprehensive anonymous tip to the Internal Revenue Service, complete with documentation of the tax fraud schemes I had uncovered. Similar packages were prepared for the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Environmental Protection Agency, each focusing on the specific violations under their jurisdiction. Are you sure about this last step? Tyler asked as I prepared to submit the final whistleblower report. Once this goes in, there's no turning back. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the send button. Was I doing this for justice or for revenge? The line had become blurred in my mind. If I don't do this, I said slowly, they'll just continue. They'll hurt more investors, damage more communities with their environmental negligence, corrupt more officials with their bribes. This isn't just about me anymore. I pressed send, then closed my laptop. An eerie calm settled over me, the quiet that comes after making a momentous decision. There was no satisfaction, no triumphant feeling of victory, just the certainty that I had done what needed to be done. Tyler and I relocated to a serviced apartment in a different part of the city that evening, a precaution Diane had suggested. Your family will react strongly, she had warned. Better to be somewhere they don't expect while the initial storm hits. We didn't have to wait long. At 5:42 the next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, voicemails, emails, all from family members who had suddenly remembered I existed. Most were from James, ranging from confused, What the hell is going on with the payroll system? To threatening, you have no idea what you've done. Dad is going to destroy you for this. My father's messages were colder, more controlled. Whatever game you're playing stops now. Come to the office immediately. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded each message to Diane, who added them to our growing file of documentation. By noon, my family had realized something more significant was happening. The payroll issue had led to the discovery of my resignation letter. The corporate council had called an emergency board meeting. My father's tone shifted from commanding to concerned. Mackenzie, we need to talk. Whatever you think you know, there's an explanation. Call me. Still, I maintained my silence. At 3:17 p.m., exactly 6 days after I had seen the Hawaii photos, my phone rang with a call from an unfamiliar Washington, D.C. number. It was an IRS investigator, requesting a preliminary interview about the information I had provided. They had already contacted my father. The war had officially begun. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of legal consultations and preparation. Diane arranged for me to speak with IRS investigators, with her present as my counsel. I provided additional context to the documents I had submitted, explaining the corporate structure and identifying key decision-makers. Your father has already retained criminal defense attorneys, Diane informed me after the meeting. The agency moves quickly in cases with this level of documentation. They've likely already secured warrants for financial records. I felt oddly detached as she spoke, as if we were discussing characters in a film rather than my own family. The reality of what I had set in motion hadn't fully registered yet. That evening, my phone began ringing incessantly. First my mother, then Rebecca, then extended family members who had never bothered to call me before. I silenced them all. Only James didn't call, which worried me more than if he had. James was calculating, vindictive. His silence suggested he was planning something rather than reacting emotionally. It was nearly midnight when my father finally arrived at our temporary apartment. Tyler and I had been watching a movie, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, when the building security called up. "There's a Richard Warner here insisting on seeing you," the concierge said. "He's quite determined." Tyler looked at me questioningly. I took a deep breath. "Send him away," I told the concierge. But minutes later, there was pounding on our door. My father had apparently convinced or bribed his way past security. "Mackenzie." His voice carried clearly through the door. "Open this door immediately. I know you're in there." Tyler moved toward the door, but I placed a hand on his arm. "Not yet," I whispered. "Let him wait." For 20 minutes, my father alternated between pounding on the door and yelling demands. I could hear the strain in his voice gradually increasing. The legendary Richard Warner composure cracking for perhaps the first time in his life. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he shouted. "The company, our reputation, everything we've built. For what? Because you felt left out of a family vacation." His reduction of my grievances to something so trivial only strengthened my resolve. Finally, when his voice had grown hoarse and the pounding less frequent, I nodded to Tyler. "Now," I said quietly. Tyler opened the door to reveal my father, the imposing, immaculate Richard Warner, disheveled and red-faced. He pushed past Tyler into the apartment, his eyes locking onto mine with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "The IRS is crawling all over our offices. The board is in panic mode. Is this because of that stupid Hawaii trip? Are you really that petty?" I remained seated, my voice calm. "Hello, Dad. Please keep your voice down. It's late, and there are other residents in this building." My composure seemed to infuriate him further. He paced the living room like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea the damage you've caused? Years of work, destroyed because you had your feelings hurt." "This isn't about Hawaii," I said evenly, though that was certainly illuminating. "This is about years of systematic exclusion and marginalization. This is about the illegal activities I discovered that put me at legal risk as a director. This is about protecting myself when it became clear that my own family was willing to sacrifice me." He scoffed. "Illegal activities? Don't be dramatic. Every company has financial optimizations. It's just business. Tax fraud is not just business, Dad. Neither is misappropriation of investor funds or falsifying environmental reports. These are serious crimes with serious consequences. For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw fear flash across his face before it was replaced by calculation. Mackenzie, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. You've misinterpreted some complex financial structures. We can fix this. Come back to the company, and we'll give you a proper position, executive vice president. Your own division to run. Whatever you want. The offer might have tempted me once, the validation and position I had always craved. But now it just felt hollow. It's too late for that, I said. The investigations have already begun. The evidence has been submitted. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't stop it now. His expression darkened again. So that's it? You're willing to destroy your family, your legacy, out of spite. My legacy? I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. When has it ever been my legacy, Dad? It was always James's legacy. I was just the backup plan, the workhorse you kept around in case he completely self-destructed. You made that abundantly clear when you planned a family reunion immediately after my wedding and excluded me and my husband. That trip was planned months ago. We couldn't change the dates because of your wedding whims. Funny, since I set our wedding date a year in advance and notified everyone immediately. He had no response to that. Instead, he switched tactics, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. You won't get away with this. You think you can just walk away from the Warner family and take us down in the process? I built this company. I made you who you are. Tyler, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. I think you should leave now, Richard. My father looked at Tyler as if noticing him for the first time. This is your influence, isn't it? Turning my daughter against her family? Tyler has nothing to do with your criminal activities, I said firmly, or with your decision to exclude me from the family. Those choices were all yours. For a moment, my father looked like he might lunge at one of us. Then, abruptly, his shoulders sagged. The fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving behind an old man I barely recognized. You have no idea what you've started, he said quietly. This won't just affect me. Your mother, your siblings, will all be dragged through the mud. The Warner name will be ruined. Is that really what you want? For the first time that evening, I felt a flicker of doubt. Not about the righteousness of my actions, but about the collateral damage they would cause. My mother, for all her faults, wasn't directly involved in the company's operations. Rebecca, self-absorbed as she was, likely had no knowledge of the financial fraud. I didn't want any of this, I said finally. All I ever wanted was to be valued as part of this family, to contribute to the company based on my merits. You're the one who chose to push me out, to engage in illegal activities, to treat me as disposable. These are the consequences of your choices. Not mine. He stared at me for a long moment, a strange mixture of rage and something that might have been respect flickering in his eyes. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. Tyler wrapped his arms around me as I collapsed into tears. It's over, he murmured into my hair. You did what you had to do. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The following weeks unfolded like a corporate thriller. Warner Development stock plummeted as news of the investigations leaked to the press. The board forced my father to take a leave of absence pending the outcome. James was directly implicated in several of the fraudulent schemes and was placed under investigation himself. Former family allies scattered like rats from a sinking ship. Business associates who had canceled their wedding attendance suddenly reached out with expressions of support and claims that they always knew something was off with the company's practices. My mother called daily, her messages oscillating between pleading and accusatory. How could you do this to us? She cried in one voicemail. Your father hasn't slept in days. The neighbors are talking. My charity board is considering asking for my resignation. Rebecca's response was more direct. She showed up at my office, I had accepted a temporary consulting position with a rival development firm, her eyes red from crying. "They're saying Daddy might go to prison," she said, her voice breaking. "Did you hate us that much? Was being left out of one stupid vacation worth destroying everything?" I invited her to sit down, ordered coffee for us both, and for the first time, told her the whole story, not just about Hawaii, but about years of systematic exclusion, about the illegal activities I had discovered, about the plans to push me out of the company entirely. As I spoke, I saw a shift in her expression, from anger to confusion to a dawning comprehension. "I didn't know," she said finally, "about any of it. The business stuff, that was always Dad and James. And the Hawaii trip. I just thought you wouldn't want to come right after your honeymoon. I never thought that it would feel like a deliberate exclusion, like a statement that the family was finally whole without me." She winced at my reference to the photo caption. Lily didn't mean it like that. She was talking about Aunt Patricia finally joining us after her cancer treatment. The explanation hit me like a physical blow. Had I misinterpreted everything? Had my hurt feelings led me to actions that were destroying my family unnecessarily? But then I remembered the financial documents, the fraudulent reports, the investor funds that had been misappropriated. Whatever the intent behind the Hawaii trip, the corporate crimes were very real. The vacation might have been a misunderstanding, I conceded. But the illegal activities at Warner Development weren't. Dad and James were breaking the law, Rebecca. They were putting the entire company, and potentially all of us, at risk. She was quiet for a long moment. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "The investigations will continue. There will likely be settlements, fines, possibly criminal charges for those directly involved. The company will survive in some form, but it will be different." "And us? The family?" I had no answer for that. The Warner family, as I had known it, was already irrevocably changed. The legal processes ground forward with inexorable momentum. My father ultimately negotiated a settlement with federal authorities that included his resignation from the company, substantial financial penalties, and a deferred prosecution agreement. James wasn't so fortunate. His direct involvement in the most egregious violations resulted in criminal charges. Warner Development survived, but in a diminished form. Many projects were sold off to cover penalties and settlements with defrauded investors. The board was entirely reconstituted with independent directors. The Warner family retained only a minority ownership stake. Throughout it all, Tyler remained my rock, never questioning my decisions or suggesting I had gone too far. "You didn't create this situation," he reminded me whenever I expressed doubt. "You just exposed what was already there." 6 months after that confrontation with my father, as the dust began to settle, I received an unexpected message from Rebecca. "Mom's birthday dinner tonight. Small gathering, just family. Please come. We need to start somewhere." I showed the message to Tyler. "What do you think?" I asked. He considered it carefully. "I think you need to decide what kind of relationship you want with them going forward. Not what they deserve, but what you need." That night, Tyler and I stood outside my parents' home, smaller than their previous mansion, but still impressive. Through the window, I could see my mother, father, and Rebecca already seated at the dining table. They looked older, subdued, but they were there, together. "Ready?" Tyler asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath. "No," I admitted. "But I'm going in anyway." The path to healing would be long and uncertain. Some wounds might never fully close. But as I rang the doorbell, I knew that whatever happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. I had reclaimed my power, my voice, and my future. The Warner legacy would no longer define me. I would define myself. 1 year after what the Boston business community now referred to as the Warner implosion, I stood in the lobby of a renovated industrial building in Cambridge, watching as workers installed the sleek signage for Warner Hayes Development Group. The company I had founded with Tyler had just acquired its third property, a mixed-use development that would combine affordable housing with community spaces and small business incubators. "What do you think?" Tyler asked. wrapping his arm around my waist as we watched the final letter being secured into place. "I think my grandfather would be proud," I said truthfully. This is the kind of development he started with, projects that built communities, not just profits. In the aftermath of Warner Development's restructuring, I had used my settlement from the whistleblower claims to start our new venture. Unlike my father's company, ours prioritized sustainability, community input, and transparent business practices. We were smaller, certainly, but our reputation for integrity was attracting investors who had been burned by the old Warner model. My relationship with my family had evolved into something I would have once considered impossible, a careful, limited connection governed by clear boundaries. My father and I communicated primarily through attorneys regarding the remaining family business interests. He had never explicitly apologized for his actions, but there had been a subtle shift in his demeanor, a grudging respect that replaced the dismissive attitude of the past. James had served 6 months in a minimum security prison for securities fraud and was now living in Florida, ostensibly working on a memoir about corporate redemption that no one particularly wanted to read. We hadn't spoken since the investigations began, and I doubted we ever would again. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. My mother had perhaps undergone the most surprising transformation. Stripped of her social status and much of her wealth, she had been forced to confront the emptiness of the life she had constructed around appearances. Our relationship remained strained, but there were moments of genuine connection that would have been impossible before. The most unexpected development had been with Rebecca. After our conversation in my office that day, she had begun a painful process of separating her identity from the Warner family mythology. Her marriage to Bradley had not survived the scandal. He had filed for divorce once the Warner name became a liability rather than an asset. The experience had humbled her in ways I would never have anticipated. "Are you still going to lunch with Rebecca tomorrow?" Tyler asked as we turned to leave the building. "Yes. She wants to show me the website for her new foundation," I replied. Rebecca had used her portion of the family settlement to establish a nonprofit focused on supporting women entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. It was meaningful work that seemed to fulfill her in ways that social climbing never had. "I'm glad you two found your way back to each other," Tyler said. "Family is important, even if it's not the family you started with." His words captured a truth I had come to understand deeply over the past year. Family wasn't defined by DNA or shared names. It was defined by respect, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. My chosen family had expanded beyond Tyler to include people like Diane Foster, who had become a trusted advisor and friend, Jacob Chin, our company's brilliant head of sustainable design, and Maria Rodriguez, a community organizer who had helped shape our development philosophy. These relationships, built on mutual respect rather than obligation, had brought a richness to my life that the Warner name never could. The legal aftermath of my whistleblowing continued to unfold. I had testified in several proceedings, facing hostile questioning from attorneys representing former Warner Development executives. Each time, I spoke the truth plainly, without vindictiveness, but without apology. "You deliberately set out to destroy your family's company, didn't you, Ms. Warner?" one particularly aggressive lawyer had demanded during a deposition. "I set out to stop illegal activities that were harming investors, communities, and eventually would have harmed the company itself," I had responded calmly. The fact that those activities were being conducted by my family members didn't make them any less illegal. There had been costs to my decisions, beyond the fractured family relationships. Former family friends had chosen sides, most aligning with my father. I had received threatening messages from employees who lost jobs in the company restructuring. There had been a particularly vicious profile in a business magazine that portrayed me as a vengeful daughter who had overreacted to family slights. But there had also been unexpected support. Former Warner Development employees who had been uncomfortable with the company's practices reached out to thank me. Several had joined our new venture. Investors who had been defrauded expressed their gratitude for bringing the truth to light. A women's business alliance had presented me with an award for corporate ethics. Through it all, Tyler had been my constant, my true partner in every sense. He had never once questioned whether the pain and public scrutiny had been worth it. Never suggested that I should have looked the other way for an easier life. "You know what today is, don't you?" he asked as we walked to our car. I smiled. 1 year since we closed on our first property. The official anniversary of Warner Hayes. That too, he acknowledged. But it's also exactly 18 months since that night your father showed up at our door. I hadn't realized the significance of the date. 18 months since the confrontation that had felt like both an ending and a beginning. 18 months of rebuilding, redefining, reclaiming my life on my own terms. "Do you ever regret it?" Tyler asked quietly. "Any of it?" I considered the question seriously as we drove through the Cambridge streets. Did I regret sending that text message after seeing the Hawaii photos? Did I regret submitting evidence that I knew would devastate my family? Did I regret opening the door after letting my father pound on it for 20 minutes? I regret that it had to happen. I said finally. I regret that my father built a company and a family based on appearance rather than substance. I regret that it took such a dramatic rupture for me to break free of patterns that were destroying me. I paused, watching the city pass by outside the window. But no, I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret refusing to be complicit in illegal activities. And I don't regret creating something new that aligns with my values. That evening, as we hosted a small gathering to celebrate our company's anniversary, I looked around at the faces of people who had chosen to be part of our vision: employees, investors, community partners. There was an energy in the room, a sense of shared purpose that I had never felt in the Grand Warner Development boardroom. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rebecca. "Congratulations on the anniversary." Dad saw the article in the Business Journal. He didn't say it, but I could tell he was impressed. I smiled slightly as I put the phone away. My father's approval had once been the driving force of my life, the validation I desperately sought. Now it was just an interesting footnote, neither necessary nor particularly important to my happiness. Later that night, as Tyler and I walked home along the Charles River, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The journey had been painful, but necessary. I had learned that standing up for yourself sometimes means standing alone, at least temporarily. That family should be defined by love and respect, not obligation or shared DNA. That integrity has a cost, but compromising your values costs even more in the long run. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by the Warner name or my place within that family. It was determined by the life I chose to build, the relationships I nurtured, and the values I upheld, even when doing so was difficult. "What are you thinking about?" Tyler asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "I'm thinking about that group chat," I said with a small laugh. How being excluded from it felt like the end of the world at the time. How it was actually the beginning of something much better. Tyler smiled, squeezing my hand. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us exactly where we need to be. He was right. That wedding day betrayal, as painful as it had been, had freed me from patterns and expectations that would have slowly suffocated my spirit. It had pushed me to take actions I might otherwise have avoided out of misplaced loyalty. It had cleared the path for a life built on authenticity rather than appearance. The Warner name would always be part of my history, but it no longer defined my future. That future belonged to me alone, to shape according to my own values, with people who truly cared about my well-being. And that was a legacy worth building. Have you ever had to stand up to toxic family members or walk away from relationships that weren't serving you? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your well-being. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your strength in difficult situations. And remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.